Geeky KOOL presents Professor and Ace, Episode 9. Hey everybody, this is Larry. I'm the Professor. Ace, who's normally with us, or also known as AJ, is not going to make it tonight. She's had some things going on and wanted to be here, especially because we have a very special guest tonight, and we wanted to go ahead and get her on. Geeky KOOL's own Ashely is here. Oh, wait. Hi, Ashely. There she is. Ashely is one of our writers at Geeky KOOL, and she's also an author of a book, and she's also been published in another book. So wanted to talk about those things and where you can pick that up. By the way, here is the book, Lament of Midnight. We're going to talk about that tonight, and I'm real excited because Ashely and I have known each other for quite a while now. I met her through her boyfriend, of all things through a sports site, so I don't know. But Ashely's great, and we are glad to have her with us. So welcome, Ashely.
Hey everyone, thank you, Larry, for having me on the show.
Hey, my pleasure.
I've been writing for Geek KOOL, so that helps.
We love when you write for us, and when you can do anything to help, we always love that, Ashely. And you do a great job of covering conventions and everything else. So, but before we begin talking about your book and other things, wanted to mention, considered maybe not having tonight just because of everything going on with the protests and the death, and people are trying to make today a focus on remembering what has happened and the racial tensions in our country and the problems. I wanted to go ahead and have our show as a way to honor that we stand with people of all colors. We support our friends, and even people that aren't our friends, that are darker skinned, African American, whatever you want to call yourself. If you worry about the cops pulling you over because you don't know what's going to happen, we stand with you. And we just want you to know we're here, and want our voices to be made known that we're with you no matter what. So anyway, we will end that part unless it comes up in conversation later, but which we can always do. But wanted to say that wanted people to know that we're not unaware of what's going on. We're very aware. And also, for those that don't know, Geeky KOOL's website is currently down, has been since Friday. Basically, our hosting company, we use a company to host our site, they were viciously attacked and basically brought their whole system down. It's gradually started coming up since Sunday. We're still not up. We are on the priority list to get our site up and going. It just hasn't been able to happen yet. So hopefully by tomorrow. I was hoping by today, but just checked before the show started, and we're still down. So wanted everybody to know we aren't dead. We're still out there. Right now, there's a new message. So if you had tried it over the weekend, you got a message about it not existing. Now it's getting a 500 internal error. So that's positive. At least we're getting an error now, not just that. So, all right, those are all the housekeeping things. So we'll jump in here. So Ashely, for those that have not read your book, and I've got another thing here to pull up about your book. Why don't you tell everybody a little bit about what your book's about, the two stories in your poetry, and then talk a little bit about the process of how this book happened for you.
Well, my book has many different horror themes, although there are some lighthearted subjects in there. Not all of the poems are dark, and I would have to say this would be more of like a medium R.L. Stine, Stephen King-ish mix. It really depends on what you pick.
Right.
And funnily enough, I didn't notice this, but my publisher, Thomas, noticed this, that this book and all of my writings from this book past this book, they're kind of forming their own universe.
That's true. Yeah.
This is kind of the springboard of my works, if you can put it like that. I mean, they have multiple different topics, but there is a similar hospital theme in both of the short stories, and those are definitely darker than the poetry is. So if I had to rate it on a scale of child to adult, I would say the poetry is definitely more child friendly, but the short stories should be teenagers and adults only.
Well, and I think some kids could handle it. It really depends on the kid, on how well they handle kind of the whole suspense and twist on things. Because as I read them, well, the first story really had me going, I'm heartbroken for this doll. Oh my gosh! But but yeah, I can definitely see it, especially younger kids who may not be exposed to it. If AJ was on with us, and she does say hi, by the way, we're going to pull up some messages here. But people like AJ and some other people I know that started watching horror movies at age 5, you're probably going to be able to handle that as a 7 or 8 year old. My 11-year-old, probably not, because that's just not his thing, and he would probably freaked out by it. So.
Well, I was 10 when I first read Pet Sematary, and that introduced me
Oh,
to the wonderful world of Stephen King. So
uh-huh.
that's part of the inspiration right there.
That's a big thing. Well, let's pull up some comments real quick before you continue. So I hate to cut you off, but let's. So we have RG here saying hello to us, and he also has another comment that he's a big fan. So that's
Thank
awesome.
you, Rusty.
And then we actually, here comes a third comment from him. You know, I agree with you very much, RD. I also grew up watching reruns of Twilight Zone. In fact, I have a channel here in Springfield that shows a lot of the old Twilight Zones, like at 11 o'clock at night. And I end up watching those because they resonate so much with me. I really love that kind of a little bit off. Not horror like in Friday the 13th, but things aren't quite right, and how this world, and I love stuff like that kind of gives you that twist. And your writing definitely does that, Ashely. So a couple comments here from AJ. So apologizes for not being with us, and she's having some things going on. She also wanted you to know that she read your book and really enjoyed it. And I'm going to make you a promise that we're going to have you back on with us, Ashely, when AJ can be here. So, because AJ is really our book reviewer, she's the person with 1 million books in her room. I'm the guy who can barely get through a novel in a couple of years. So, I'm not as good of a reader as she is, and she really enjoyed it. So, so we will have you back on with us when AJ could be with us, because I would love to see your guys' interaction.
No, I can't wait.
So, all right. So you're telling us about the book, about the stories being a little darker than the poetry. And I thought it was a very interesting way to have a story start and a story end your book with poetry in between. I thought that was a really interesting method to do that. So what kind of led to the structure of the book, and what writings went in and what didn't?
Well, I write poetry at random. Recently I've been writing haikus, so the poetry, oddly enough, was written first.
Right.
Then, when I was unemployed last year from a horrible fast food job, I wrote for Dolly, and I had already talked to Thomas, my publisher, about making another book. So originally the idea was to have just Poor Dolly and then the poetry, and have Poor Dolly start. However, in August of last year, I ended up breaking my arm, and when I was on heavy painkillers, right before the surgery needed on my arm, I ended up having like recurring nightmares of just weird things, like the doctors amputating the wrong arm. I mean, doing horrible things, and that kind of inspired the second short story, which wasn't even intentional. I wrote that on my cell phone with one hand.
Wow. So, and that goes to the whole arm of the main character, who's male in the story. but how his arm is hurt and all that he's going through in this process, because it's really interesting, because it starts off and you're like, okay, where's this going, and then all of a sudden it takes a twist and you're like, oh, okay, I'm on board. So yeah.
Yeah, that was I very heavily blame the painkillers they gave me after the surgery for the way that story turned out, because even I was barely conscious when I sent it off to my publisher, and he was like, "Wow, this is great," and not the way you normally write.
Yeah, it was a different story for you. I can see that. Yeah, because it's very different than the Dolly story. So, well, so that's how those came about. And you'd mentioned you write poetry all the time. And the great thing is AJ and I do also. Both of us write poetry quite a bit. I know you've seen some of mine that are thrown up on Facebook occasionally. Um, I really enjoy your poetry. It really spoke to me. So if you had told me this book was only your poetry, I would have been paid twice as much for it. But the two stories really are great in it, so that's just added benefit. So I'm like, wow, this is fun, because I love reading really good poetry that kind of makes me wonder, what were they thinking, and how do I interpret this, and how does the author, what drives that? Which, I do that to my own poetry all the time. So that's really cool. So it's a really exciting read, as far as, for me it was exciting because I wanted to read more and more and more. And so the other thing I did was I took my time reading your poems, because I didn't want to read back to back to back to back poems. I wanted to take one and kind of digest it and think about it, because that's how I handle most of my poetry. So when you had originally sent this to me, and with the autograph, I was like, okay, I read the story, I read a poem, I put it down, picked it up next day, read another poem, put it down, and then I had company, and then I put it over here and lost it for like 3 weeks, and then found it and started reading poems again. So I know you had a story in another book before this. Can you tell us about that?
Um, well, I didn't have a short story in the other book, which is an Exaltation of Shadows, Volume 2. That's actually a poetry collection, and
Oh,
I'm the last author in the book. I'm one of six, and
I,
that was actually my basically foot in the door with getting published.
well, I knew you had something in there. I guess I forgot it was a section of poetry. So I apologize. I have not read that, but I would like to at some point. So, um, all right. So that got your foot in the door. You had that selection, and then you talked to the publisher, and they wanted you to publish. Now, what were their thoughts on what you were going to publish?
Um, the one cool thing about Dark Gatekeeper Gaming is, and Thomas in general, is because he is a small indie publisher. He
Mhm.
doesn't have to follow the rules that the big traditional publishers share, and he's pretty much given me free reign over
That's
everything I want.
awesome.
He'll message me through Twitter or email me if he has questions. He'll be like, "Hey, this isn't quite right," or "Am I missing a page?" Just small stuff like that. But he lets me take all of the direction for my own writing.
That's awesome, because a lot of times you're right. Those bigger publishers have certain investments of what they want, because they've got a lot of money on the line because of all the stuff that we're putting out. So yeah, I think that's awesome. Um, so what was the process like getting published for those of us that write all the time but don't have anything published? What are the steps that you go through in getting your stuff submitted to them, and to decide what goes in and what doesn't go into your book?
Well, deciding what goes in and what doesn't go in is actually the easier part. It all depends on the content. For example, my upcoming book probably won't have any poetry in them at all. I have a novella coming up, and I also now have a book of short stories coming up, and that was a curveball to me. But the submission process is fairly easy. I mean, I just email everything to him,
Yeah.
and the only reason that I even got into this at all is because of a website called Vampire Freak. Thomas was asking for submissions to the book, and I just took a shot in the dark, sent him a couple of my poems. He was like, "Great, I need 10 by March." This was in January of a year and a half ago. This was in January. Like, great. Oh no.
Yeah, as a writer, it's like, oh, I want that, but then now I've got a deadline, and now can I do that? Okay. Yeah. Okay. Great.
That was my biggest hurdle, was the deadline.
I can see that.
You know, the biggest way I've gotten around that is I don't submit anything to him anymore that is not completely finished. If it's not done, if I am not finished with it, I don't email it to him.
Now, I've got a question for that about that, because AJ and I were talking last week about Geek Pride Day and Tal Day and all that. And one of the things about Douglas Adams, which is who we celebrate Tal Day for, I know you know that, but for our viewers that may not know, Douglas Adams has had a method when he was alive that he would rewrite everything constantly. Whatever he had. Yeah, and so there's like 20 different versions of Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, the first book, because he continually rewrote the thing, and it was different for the radio show, it was different for the movie. He was constantly going in and revising, and I'm like, I know how that feels. Every time I go back to poetry that I put back down, I pick it back up and go, oh no, that word won't do this. It needs to be this. Oh no, I need to add a couple of lines here. Oh, I need to do this. Same thing with my stories. I'm always going back and revising it. How do you get done?
You know, I've found the easiest way for me to do that is to revise as I write, and then when I'm close to finishing, I'll go back and just edit as I need to. But I gotta be honest, it's still a pain. When I was revising my novella, I was giving myself headaches because it got to the point where I started to hate my own book. And I was like, if I read this one more time, like this better be worth it.
Yeah, I'm with you.
It's just a pain you have to deal with as an author.
And that to me is the biggest pain, other than if, especially because I'm trying to work on a novel and trying to make the time, knowing I've got this much still to write, which is most of it, but I've got it all here. But getting it to where I make that time and that effort that I'm like, okay, I've already wrote this, I just need to write it out. Between that and the revisions that I'm always doing, because even as I finished a couple of chapters, I'm going back and rewriting those chapters, and I'm like, I need to get everything out so I can then go back and revise, but I'm not doing that. So yeah, that I'm with you. That is a huge pain. So AJ's got a few things here. So she said she reads too much. That's her thing. She does read a lot, but she's a really good reader, a very fast reader, understands what she's reading. I know a lot of people that read fast. A lot of them don't really comprehend and keep that. Some people can go back and reread the same book. I take forever to read, but it stays with me.
I'm definitely a rereader. I'm a very fast reader myself. Once I read a book, I understand it instantly.
Yeah. Let's see, and I thought that was probably true of you also, because you and AJ are very much alike that way. And I think there's very few people that can do both, but you ladies are excellent at that. And as someone who writes that has never published, the whole idea of sending your writing into a publisher is a bit intimidating. I agree. That is intimidating.
The worst thing that they can say is no. Honestly.
You're exactly right.
Like I said, I took a shot in the dark a year and a half ago, and it has led to the start of a new career for me that hopefully at some point becomes profitable.
But exactly. And we're going to tell people where they can pick up your book, because they need to read this. It is excellent. And also that'll help make it a little more profitable. So AJ also says we are our worst critics, and I think that's often true. You know, I think as a writer, most of the time we have all faced rejection through life. And the fact that we pour ourselves into something and write something that fear that we're going to get rejected for something else, especially something that's so dear to us, that's very scary. So that there's some, but the fact that you're able to step out and do that is awesome, Ashely, because I know a lot of people that just are crippled by that. And oh, okay. So she wants to know if you outline your stories before you start writing.
No, not at all. I am a complete pantser. I don't even know what happens with my stories before I write them down.
And that's usually how my short stories have been. So, but my novel came to me in where I just planned the whole thing out. I've got huge details and all this stuff, and it's just stuck here. So I've got to get that out. So, but yeah.
I'm going to let you know a secret. Even with my novella that should be coming out in the next couple of months, I didn't outline it at all. I can't. I'm just not the type of person that can sit there and draw an outline.
I
Whatever. I either have to be in the mood to write or not. And if I try to outline it, it ends up being crap.
Well, and what I've seemed to find is a lot of times things don't go as I planned. So even if I do outline it, I end up tossing the outline pretty shortly in because I'm not following it anyway. So AJ also says passions never are profitable at the beginning, and that's true. Not the beginning, but hopefully as time goes on, very profitable.
Yes, I mean, that is true. Dark Gatekeeper Gaming would definitely agree. Right now, it's a labor of love.
Right. Well, and I think for any artist, and I consider writers, I consider us artists. We just paint with words rather than paint. AJ does all sorts of creative things. I only use words, and sometimes not very effectively. But but anyway, but as artists, basically, we are so passionate and so into those things. It has to be a labor of love because that's the whole reason to do it. I can't write something if it's not in my heart. I'm sure I can do some technical writing, but I find that horribly boring. For me to actually write something, I have to be passionate about it. So I think that's probably true of most of us writers. You don't write stories because you're trying to make a profit. You're writing because you're driven to do that. It's a part of who you are, and then hopefully you get to be profitable with it. So
Yeah, let us hope. Although I'll let you guys in on a little secret. I drew the cover of Lament of Midnight.
and I knew that, by the way, which is for those that. And let me actually pull this up this way because I've got it over here also for us. Banner. No, it's not red. Right there. There it is for people to see a little better. Being that it's a horror novel, this is actually perfect because then you've got the blood splatter there. Not, you got the arm hanging off, which fits so well with your story. So that's really cool. I could not do that. I would have to pay somebody because my artistic ability is on the the
there was a graphic designer included. God help me. I apologize. I don't know her name. She did edit it. She did turn it into the cover that we know today, but the image is mine.
That is awesome. That is really awesome. And AJ says it's a great cover.
Thank you.
She also says she never outlines, let the story create their own path. Yeah, I think that's true. I mean, for writers that do outline, I know it's very helpful for them. It gives them some focus. Different people, I think, need different things. I'm so flighty that outlining always took me longer than they actually write it. I would do that in writing in high school when I was doing a lot of the writing for my classes. They would say provide an outline and all this, and I'm like, how am I get the outline done? I could get the thing done before I outline it. Gosh.
The one that always tripped me up were those spider web ones where they had you like and in the little circle.
Like that's going to tell me what I'm going to do. I don't know. So tell us a little bit about your next books coming up, because you had mentioned you've got a couple things coming up soon, and how we're going to be able to get those when that happens.
Well, as far as I know, now my publisher, he changes things all the time as far as scheduling. It is just the way he is. As far as I know, my next book is going to be my novella, which is called When the Ferris Wheel Lights Are Dead. And this book, I wanted to explore what extreme social isolation would be in a character. And the main character's name is Kember. She is the only survivor of a destroyed carnival. And I have to admit, it took a lot of weird turns. I expected it to be more of a crime drama. That's not what happened. It ended up just being a straight horror novel halfway through. But I mean, I was surprised. It only took me about a month and a half to write, although it is very short. It's not a full-length novel.
Well, but still, I mean, that's great because, that's still putting on a lot of words right there, making it work. So that's fantastic. Is it still going to be with the drive-through fiction?
Yes,
Let's
it is.
put this up here. So for those of you that want to pick up her book, you can get a hardback, or not hardback, you can get a softback version like this, or you can pick up a digital version. If you prefer a digital version, you can pick that up. Go to drivethroughfiction.com, use the search feature, and get the Lament into Midnight. And be looking for her other books. Now, do we have a time frame when those are coming?
Not right now.
All right. Because I know you said times change.
I know he's working on them. Yeah, I know he's working on them, but I can't tell you exactly what's going to come out yet. And like I said, I'm thrown for a loophole because he also wants a third book that is just short stories. I sent him 2 short stories. One was originally going to be at the end of When the Ferris Wheel Lights Are Dead. And I honestly, the other short story I sent him, I had written like 5-6 years ago, didn't think anything of it, didn't even think that he liked it. And then I get this email back saying, oh my God, this is great. Do you know you've created a time span that stretches over 5 centuries? What? I mean, in my head, I'm thinking like, you're kidding, right? So now I'm focusing a little bit more on short stories to get the third book out.
There you go. That's awesome. So, yeah, a lot of times artists and writers, we do things for our own therapy. A lot of times we'll write things to be therapeutic for us, or draw things to be therapeutic for us, or whatever. And a lot of times it's because we're dealing with whatever. As you had said, you wrote the one story because of what you're going through at the hospital. You're doing it with one hand while your arm was broken. And I do remember when you went through that, and you were very loopy at that point. You stayed that way for a little while. Because I got some interesting messages. I'm like, are you okay? Because things are going pretty wild there. So, but
well, if anybody wants to see the X-ray, they can message my fiance. He has it. It would explain everything.
Yeah, that really does. So do you find it therapeutic for your writing? Do you see yourself working through your own issues with that, or does it depend on what you're writing, or how does that affect you?
It mostly depends on what I'm writing. A couple of my poems and even more recent short stories have become very political with current events going around.
Yeah.
But at the same time, my novella was semi-therapeutic for me. And the novel that I'm currently working on, which is only halfway finished, I don't even think this is going to get out until the end of next year if it gets published. I mean, I'm pretty sure it will, but I have no idea when because I'm not even done with it.
Right.
It was therapeutic and was taking a lot of space off my own life. And I did a lot of research for this book. I asked around a lot on Twitter for this book, so I would be lying if I said it was just my own experience. It's still a work of fiction.
Right.
But it's helping me work through a lot of things in my past that were definitely hard to get rid of.
Completely understand that makes a lot of sense to me. So, what else would you like to tell our listeners and people watching this tonight? Anything that that they can know, that they should know about you, or anything about your books that I'm not asking?
Well, all I really want to reiterate to the viewers is don't let yourself get trapped in your own head. Because I do that all the time. Every single new thing that I send off to Dark Gatekeeper Gaming, I always second guess it. I always double check whether it's good or not. It got to the point where Thomas was like mildly getting irritated with me. And he was like, "Why are you asking me this? You know I'm going to publish it. Stop asking me if you're good. Just shut up already." So don't let yourself be your own worst enemy.
Yeah, and that's hard to do. No, that's really encouraging. So I appreciate that. So, as a writer myself who doubts his writing ability all the time, I'm right there. So yeah. Um, Goodness, Ashely, I didn't write a whole lot down because I just wanted to talk about your book, talk about your poetry, and I know we've done that, but I don't want to cut us off either. So, anything you want to talk about? Anything geek-wise you want to talk about? Anything going on that we want to talk about?
Yes, actually, that you mentioned it. I will have to say, DC Universe's Harley Quinn is probably one of the best representations of the character I've seen. And this is coming from a diehard Harley Quinn fan who's read all the comics. And I've gotten addicted to that show. I couldn't believe how addicted I got to that show. And I know you definitely enjoy it yourself.
Well, and I actually haven't watched it yet. So mainly because I don't have DC Universe, but I'm hoping it's. My daughter got a subscription to the HBO Max. That's okay because I provide for her Netflix, Hulu, Disney Plus, Amazon. So she's 19 and she's like, "Hey, I bought this. Do you want to be able to access it?" Well, yeah. So I'm enjoying that, and so I'm hoping it's going to come to HBO Max just like the rest of them are, because that would make my life easier. Because I'm like, I want to see these shows on DC Universe. I just haven't paid for it and sat down and done it yet. So,
Well, here's a helpful hint. Harley Quinn is now on Sci-Fi as well. So if you have
oh
Sci-Fi on
really?
demand, yes. So if you have Sci-Fi on demand, you can watch it there.
Well, there we go. That'll be helpful. I did not know that. AJ's got some questions for us, and this is why I wanted AJ to be with us, because AJ is really good at these questions. So AJ wants to know what your biggest influences are.
I would have to say my three biggest influences were R.L. Stine, Stephen King, and Edgar Allan Poe.
Ah, very different writers there. Stein being more geared for kids, but still bringing in that flair. King, is really been since the 80s kind of the it guy on writing horror, but never having his movies never quite adapted well until recently. And Poe is just classic there. I mean, um, Poe is so much more than the Raven. The Raven's great, and I don't want to, downplay that, but Poe is such a really interesting read and such a really interesting guy. So those are great influences. They kind of spanned over the whole horizon of different horror. So that's awesome.
Yes, and I never expected, as I told one of my friends last week, I never expected to write a short story that was basically a modern day version of The Mask of the Red Death. But I also never expected it lived through a plague. So,
This is true.
oh,
Yeah, things are way different than we expected 2020 to be right now. Never expected this. So, yeah. So, AJ also wants to know what your favorite book is.
oh, Pet Cemetery, hands down. A
So
no
the one that
contest,
got you
definitely Pet
started.
Cemetery.
The
Yep.
one that got you started. Yeah. All right. All right. She also says great horror writers with extremely different styles, and that's right on. Um, and also says Raven is her least favorite Poe story.
Okay, now I'm wounded. I mean, I love Edgar Allan Poe. The Raven's always my favorite. I mean,
And
well, that and the Pendulum.
and that's okay. You know, it's interesting for me. The Raven got me started reading Poe, so that was my starting point because that was I wanted to read classics and see what it was all about. Dracula, Frankenstein, Poe, and so read Raven, and then started looking at other works, and so I found that fascinating because that was my entry to Poe. But I really enjoy a lot of Poe's other stuff also. So yeah, so I'm more in the middle, and you two are on the sides, and that's okay.
Well, fun story about that. My very traditional Irish American grandmother raised me on all of the Victorian classics, including Edgar Allan Poe, Bram Stoker, Mary
Mhm.
Shelley. So by the time I entered middle school and high school and we were doing Edgar Allan Poe and they'd give us those crappy abridged versions, I actually like got angry with it. I'm like, no, this is not the story. I know the real story. This is the whole thing.
Yeah, I understand that. Yeah.
And
No.
for me, it was a normal part of childhood.
Now, the fact that you read Bram Stoker's Dracula back then, because, oh my gosh, I could barely make it through that book. The repetitiveness in the middle of the book where is she going to
I
die? Oh, we're going to get her fixed. Oh, then the next night she's going to get bit again. Will you stop it? And then the ending, I'm like, that's the end? That's how they kill Dracula in the end?
I agree. It's not Bram Stoker's best work. I have to say, as far as Bram Stoker books go, The Wolfman is so much better. Now, Dracula as a movie is wonderful,
Oh,
but as a
agreed.
book, not so much.
Um,
Well, no, it's not a bad story. It's just it's a better movie.
right, right.
And everybody has their favorite version. My favorite version is the Bela Lugosi version, hands down.
Well, that's the classic version. So yeah, I'm with you. Now I'm a big fan, and my wife makes fun of me, and my kids do too. But I watched a show called Spenguli. Are you familiar
Oh,
with Spenguli?
I love him.
Yeah, it's all these B or older horror movies, but a lot of them are B movies. I just love that to death. And he shows all the classic Dracula movies, and I just really dig that because I'm like, I like things to where you don't have to have the blood spurts everywhere. I don't mind some of that, but a horror movie should just be a guy with an axe chopping things off and watching blood fly, in my opinion. Make me actually scared, or like my favorite my, my favorite kind of that genre movie was Rebecca. I don't know if you ever saw Rebecca. It was one of the very early movies from
I've heard of
what's his name? Gosh, the Birds, the
Alfred
Psycho.
Hitchcock.
Hitchcock. Thank you. Oh my gosh. And I watch Alfred Hitchcock Presents all the time too. So, but it's my favorite kind of horror movie because the way it uses the intensity, it builds and builds and builds, and then you're more scared about the things you don't see than what you do see. I love that, and I actually felt that in your second story. You got that almost. It was almost more scary when your character didn't know what was going on, and when he'd be like, "What is happening here? What am I facing? This is just so weird." So, I but yeah, that's where I come from. Okay, so we have some more comments here. Oh, your boyfriend's even commenting there. So before we get to him, AJ also says she loves the classic monster movies. I do too.
I'm definitely right up there.
Classic Dracula, yes, from Jay. Yeah. I'm. Oh, see, AJ knows Rebecca. Yeah, so Rebecca is one that you should check out at some point. I think you'll really like it.
I will
It,
definitely. I've heard of it. I've just never gotten the opportunity to
it,
see it.
it's not easy to find. I even tried to find it on Voodoo and some place to buy it. And so the story of why I like Rebecca, and it's hysterical because my mom does not remember this. When back in the 80s, especially the early 80s, where we didn't have cable TV. Cable was just starting. We did not have that. So television stations would go off the air, but on Friday and Saturday nights, they would stay up late and show old movies a lot of time.
I remember that in the early 90s as well,
yeah,
on public TV.
exactly. So you understand the reference. So basically, my first movie that I was able to stay up with my mom that was a scary movie was Rebecca. And I sat on the couch and watched the 19-inch color TV because that was the big deal there, and watched it with her. We were watching it from like midnight till like 2:30 in the morning. But it was a great bonding experience with me and my mom. And she has no remembrance of this at all. But I'm like, this is what got me kind of into watching these movies, and part of why I really, really like Hitchcock style is because my mom enjoyed it and I was enjoying it and enjoying spending some quality time with my mother. So anyway, enough about me and my mom. I sound like a psychiatrist. No, I have a counseling degree. How about that? So all right. So your boyfriend, hey John. John says hi, and then we have Rebecca is so spooky, and I agree. That's what I loved about it. Because it really, you're like, is she crazy? Are these ghosts? What is going on in this thing?
I
And
have similar memories of me and my dad, except it wasn't Alfred Hitchcock. It was Vincent Price. My dad,
oh,
even to this day, is a Vincent Price fan.
yeah,
So one of my favorite movies that my dad introduced me to when I was probably about the same age, about 7 or 8, the very first Vincent Price movie I ever saw was Last Man on Earth.
nice, very nice. Yeah, yeah, I like Price. Price is one of those classic horror guys that you're like, okay, I don't care if it has a Christopher Lloyd or Vincent Price or any of those guys, the classic guys, just like, oh my gosh, I've got to watch this because it's simply amazing. Oh, and Angie pipes in that we can rent Rebecca on Amazon. So now I know that I will be watching it because I've not seen it in years. I've seen it since that first time with my mom, but it's one of those things where I just love this movie. So I would love that. So um, Jay says The Birds was mine with my parents let me watch and when I was older than Psycho. Yeah, funny thing was nowadays this could never happen, but first time I watched Psycho was at like the last day of school where you really do nothing. They would have a movie
Yeah,
room and we had Psycho on. And nowadays that would never be allowed, but I'm like,
yeah,
okay, for all the weird things.
that that might not necessarily be true because my science teacher, who was a huge movie buff, he would like go to the principal and get acceptance for us to watch movies in class. He introduced me to The Thing. He had us watch
Wow.
Psycho in class, and this was in like the early 2000s. This was in like 2004, 2005. I mean, the only reason I've ever seen Ferris Bueller's Day Off is because of this teacher.
Well, there you go. Well, Ferris is a little more acceptable for some people than something like Psycho. But yeah, maybe it probably depends on where you're at. But around here, people become so protective and people so scared of upsetting people or lawsuits or anything else. They just have basically, if it's not a Disney animated movie, you're probably not going to watch it. So
Well, as you can probably already tell from my book, Lament of Midnight, I have issues with Disney fairy tales. I like the real fairy tales. That's not to say Disney is bad. I have my fair share of movies that I like, but I loved the movie Into the Woods because
yeah,
it was the real European fairy tales.
right, right. Well, and yeah, for people that don't know, you should read the original Grimm brothers because their last name wasn't Grimm. That was they were called that because of the kind of stories that they were writing. Cinderella is not as fun and happy of a movie as the movie is for Disney. It's very intense. So
Rapunzel was the one that tripped me up when I was like 6 reading it because I had the complete collection of Grimm fairy tales, which I still have somewhere. I know it's around here somewhere. I just haven't. But Rapunzel, that one tripped me up.
I've never read Rapunzel, so now I'm peaked. I'm gonna have to go check out the original Rapunzel because I can only imagine.
It's dark. It's very dark. I mean, the
So,
Disney Rapunzel's fairly dark too, but yeah.
but not that dark.
No.
Right, right. That's a creepy concept movie in regards to Last Man. Gonna make you. Yeah, I'm with you, Jay. Yeah, yeah. Actually makes me feel. Yeah, see, I knew we were going to get some of that. Yeah, 2000 Jakes.
Well,
Yeah,
I'm still technically in my 20s. Technically.
enjoy it. Enjoy it for
I
somebody.
have 6 months left.
That's okay. I'm going to enter a whole new decade also, and it's not my 30s and it's not my 40s. So it's kind of scary because I'm like, that can't be right. I tell my kids that I'm really a time traveler because I'm like, yeah, this is when I was born, but I've been jumping around time. I'm really only about 25 because, whatever.
Bend your button.
Exactly. Frozen was a beautiful. I agree. Frozen 1 was a beautiful movie. The music was kind of overdone, but yeah. Original Grimm stories are sad and spooky. Yes, yes, they are. Burning slippers. And AJ gives us some hearts for Grimm fairy tales. So I'm glad we kind of got off on this because I was like, okay, I surely didn't do my job well being done already, but we were able to talk some other things here. Enjoy the reels.
Well, that makes me feel better.
Well, now when I don't know if you've watched the show or not, but AJ looks like she could be your age.
Well, and that's what I originally thought.
Yeah, she's got this internal youth to her that I'm like, people look at me
I might
and
have the same thing.
people don't think.
I still have people think that I'm in high school. Like I still have people think that I'm in middle school and high school. It's bad.
Well, it's because you're God. People are like, oh, you grew out of that middle school. She has to be in middle school, right?
Well, no, even when I don't have makeup on, I get carded everywhere. It's almost a curse. Like I'll go into a bar, I'll go into the 7-Eleven. They card me always, and people will even look at my birthday and will back up to me like, "You can't be this old." Yeah,
So,
I can.
so what I really want to know is what do people say when you and John are together? Are they saying, "Oh, what's your daughter?" Are they?
Yes. Yes, we get a lot of that.
They're
Oh,
like,
he's your uncle. Oh, he's your daughter. You're her father. No, my dad is John. If they saw my dad, well, actually, my dad looks younger than he really is too. All my dad would have to do is dye his hair, and people would think he's easily in his 40s. He is not. So that's where I get it from.
well, and AJ's got a theory here. The tears of fairies, virgins as you are defined. Yeah. So, um, blame it on Ohio. Well, we can blame it on Ohio. That's all right.
Why not?
But we love when you're on with us. So keep staying on with us as much as you can because we love it. Every week we're here, so we love having people on and commenting with us because that actually makes it fun. Maybe it's the blood of versions. So there you go.
Elizabeth.
Well,
Where do you find these versions?
You got to get them pretty young. So, and actually, you can find them around. Now, the key is: are you looking for guys or girls? Because I hear the guys are easier to find. I don't know. Look in the D&D room.
I don't know. I believe there's an entire movie. It was Jim Carrey's very first film called Once Bitten with that exact same premise.
So, but yeah, so we've got that. There was a villain back in the 80s for the Teen Titans, one of DC's hero groups, called Brother Blood, and the whole idea was that he would bathe in the blood of virgins, and that kept them eternally young, and the whole cult around the whole thing. And it was this kind of weird, we're going to fight a supervillain, and then we're going to have a 3-issue spec on going to this cult it's where the guys, basically bathing in blood. So it was always fun.
My personal favorite villain, I know he's kind of cheesy, from Teen Titans, is Mad Mod, just because he's so outrageous.
Yeah,
He's so
yeah.
stupid and outrageous, but it's funny. Like every episode that Mad Mod was ever in for Teen Titans, because I grew up with the original Cartoon Network show.
Right.
It's so hilarious, and that's what I liked about it. I liked the campy British parody style.
For those of us that grew up in the 80s reading the comics, that was a pretty fair version. But we were like, oh, can we get a really serious version of this, because these characters are great, and these stories are iconic. And then you get the really kind of out there version that came after what is it, Teen Titans Go? Is that what it is? And we're like, oh my god.
I caught a couple of episodes of that, and I have to say, I'm not a fan. I understand where it's coming from to an extent. Like, not me. It's basically the Powerpuff Girls of this generation. And if I take it with that grain of salt, I don't hate it as much. But, I mean, it is what it is.
No, I'm with you, and I can deal with it a little bit. And Powerpuff Girls I like, but it's not associating some of my favorite characters from my teens with something. So Powerpuff Girls, I'm like, okay, this is just fun. I can have a good time with it. But then you get Titans, you're like, but these are great characters. What are we doing here? And then I'm always kind of mad when I watch it, because Wonder Girl, Donna Troy, was never included on there. I'm like, she's my favorite character. What are you doing? She has to be in the show. So I'd get mad about the way they were doing it, and then I get mad about missing a character. Then I'm like, but I really don't want her adapted, so maybe I'm okay with that. But then DC did a movie, Titans, the Judas Project, and that's actually really well done. So for people that wanted a serious version of the characters, you can watch that. It's still, there's still some things missing for what I was hoping for with it. I was hoping more of a straight adaptation, but it's still really good. So
Yeah, I can see your point there. But I mean, it's cute for what it is, and I have to give it that.
I agree. I don't disagree with that. So
but
it's just,
I also have to admit, one of my favorite jokes in the first volume of Harley Quinn from Connor, and forgive me, I'm just really bad with names, but it was before the Rebirth, the very first issue. They do an intro with Harley Quinn, and she smacks the Teen Titans Go Titans on the head with her mallet. Repeatedly. Because she hates them.
Amanda Connor and Jimmy Garofalo, I think. Is that her husband? I think so.
I mean, I apologize. I'm just bad with names. I'm going to be honest. I tell you that. I'm horrible with names.
But the only reason I know that off the top of my head is I've met them. And they're a very nice couple. Very sweet. Very busy. Their booth was busy all the time, but very nice. I really like them. So suggest, if you're at a con some point and they're there, make sure to check them out, guys, because they're worth talking to. So all right, so a few more comments there, and then we're going to wrap it up for this session, but we will have you on again, Ashely. We will schedule another time to talk about your book, but also about your upcoming books. Hopefully we'll have some more information coming forward soon, and that would be a great time to jump on with you to promote all this. So let's see, stories. Well, and that's true. Jim Carrey movies in the 90s, right? Jim Carrey was very funny in the 90s. I really...
I think this comes from like 87, to be honest. It was his very first movie.
So about the same time he was doing In Living Color, or maybe even before he did In Living Color. So that's interesting.
Before, definitely. It's called Once Bitten. It's a very funny movie. It's definitely very dated. It shows its age. But it's a funny movie.
All right. Well, I'll be checking that out. Homework with the kids. Our school time has ended. So because we started school a little earlier in the year. Next year actually we won't be. But our school time's over, so I don't have to do that with my son anymore. It was getting a little redundant there because they were doing review stuff at this home. Everything's been sent home, but they're not expecting parents to teach new material, which is understandable. At the end of the school year anyway, not a whole lot of new material, but I'm so glad that's over. So good luck. Hopefully that homework with the kids aren't going too intense there. Teen Titans Go sucks. It was go before that. I don't
I'm all
disagree.
in agreement.
Version of pretty much any content. It's getting that way. There's some stuff out there that still has not been adapted. DC's doing a really good job of adapting a lot of stuff in their animated movies. Friend of mine is saying there's going to be some really cool stuff coming with their live action stuff in the near future. But hopefully things keep getting adapted well.
But
nothing.
But they never get Constantine right, which is irritating to me.
Yeah, that's true.
As much as I love Keanu Reeves, Hellblazer has never been adapted 100%.
Well, and the show on NBC did a good job of it. Wasn't perfect, and of course you couldn't go full on Constantine because it was on network television. They made him a little more silly when they went to Legends of Tomorrow with him, but yeah, I get that. I feel that way about a lot of characters. You're like, man, I wish there was a good adaptation of this character. It's not there yet, but
that as much I do love the Keanu Reeves movies, but what I think DC should do, especially now with movies like Deadpool and all of the other adult comic movies coming out, I think that this would be the perfect time to do a real Constantine and show all of the dark side of it, what it really is.
and that may come. That the problem I think is Warner Brothers is still a little gun shy about a lot of their comic movies. Marvel's kind of said, yeah, okay, we'll try anything. I mean, cred, when you can make Guardians of the Galaxy 1 and 2 hits, these characters were small little characters on the side, and you've made blockbuster characters out of them. You can do that. You can take characters, you can tell stories that aren't in your norm, but Warner Brothers seems to be a little anxious about it still.
And you see, part of the problem is Warner Brothers won't leave DC alone, and I've had this debate multiple times. See, when DC's left alone with its animated movies, with its cartoons, it does great. But then when it goes to live action movies, unless there's a director that's willing to go head to head with Warner Brothers until Warner Brothers back off, you get the theatrical version of Suicide Squad.
And there's rumors they're going to put out a different version for HBO Max, the director's cut, but so far that's still a rumor that's not been confirmed. I don't know. I honestly hated the Joker in Suicide Squad. Hated him. Just couldn't stand him. I'm like, give me anything but him. The rest of the characters I could all live with. Harley, of course, was great.
The extended version saves the movie.
It does.
But it's still, it's not what it could have been.
Yeah. Well, and I think you picked the wrong villain for that movie. I really didn't think going supernatural there. I understand they were trying to launch the supernatural stuff with it, but those characters aren't really meant for that. That's kind of a wild way to go. At least introduce the characters before you go there. That was kind of crazy. So anyway, but yeah, it has some positive things to it. Had some really, like, why did you do that? I don't understand, but I'd rather watch that any day than Batman versus Superman. So that's me. I've got friends that love that movie and swear by it, and God bless them. They've got reasons they love it. I don't get it. I'm like, so we have old Batman who's depressed and going far out, and you've got a superhero version of him with Superman who's also doing the whole Batman thing. I'm like, oh, so flying younger Superman or flying younger Batman versus old Batman. I don't know. I just was done. Wonder Woman saved it. Without Wonder Woman, I would have been like, I'm out.
Honestly, I think that Justice League was better. And I mean, there are some issues with Justice League, but Justice League is an enjoyable movie.
I agree with you 100%. And there are people that are real excited about the new version of Justice League going to come out next year. I'm definitely going to check that out. I'm not saying I won't, but I'm like, so far, Snyder's DC run includes Man of Steel, which I did not really like. I'm like, that's not Superman to me. That's not his parents. That's not, the fight was really cool, but I just felt like he had no connection. So, and the kids are what connects him to the world, that makes him the Boy Scout. That way you can have all those powers and still do good. And I didn't feel like that was there. And then you got Batman versus Superman, and I'm like, oh my gosh. So I don't know. Let's see. Harley smacking anybody with a mallet. That's true. Oh, there you go. Great question.
I do not have an Instagram, but I do have Twitter.
And
I have Twitter and Facebook.
We will include Ashely's Twitter, Facebook, and everything else down below. I will get that from her afterwards. I've got her Facebook. I will get her Twitter account. We'll make sure to put that in the YouTube version here, so you guys can go watch that. And this, of course, will be on Geeky Kool once Geeky Kool's back up, hopefully tomorrow. And we'll have all the information on YouTube with her information, and also on where to get her book. So, and I'll put this back up here real quick so you guys can see this. But drivethroughfiction.com is where you want to go for her book and for her future book. So you're going to want to make sure you mark that site. That way you can go back and get more when that happens. And also, they make great gifts. So as you've got graduations happening, nothing says graduation like this. You need to buy this because, especially college graduates, you really want to play with their mind. I thought of you when I bought this. What?
That would be evil. Fun, but evil.
So you've got that. You've got Father's Day coming up. You've got, if you're going to buy 4th of July gifts, Christmas, do your Christmas shopping now. Just go buy so many. They're going to have another printing, because everybody wants original printing of it. So, and that way, when Ashely is the next R.L. Stine, and people are lined up for miles, you'll be able to take. I've got the original printing. Can you sign this for me?
Larry, the version that you have is a proof copy, so you'd be able to make millions.
What I like. No, that's true, because I did request that because I wanted a signed copy. So, all right. So let me do what we normally do for the end of our show. And again, Ashely, thank you for joining us. Thank you for taking the time. And you're welcome anytime. So anytime you want to come on, you just let me know. Or if you want to join in because you want to talk about DC animated, we're going to do a section on that, just let me know. And I'll try to remember to let you know. You're always welcome. AJ and I would love to have you on the show regularly. So feel free. We're going to give a shout out to some of our other friends that we've got that are out doing the similar thing that what we do. The Nerd Informants, check them out. They've got a YouTube channel. They're also on Facebook, and they're doing all sorts of other stuff out there. So check out Nerd Informants, guys. They are worth checking out. They're a lot of fun. Our good friends Keith and Gary over at Pop Culture Minefield, those guys are funny, and they have connections into the entertainment area that I don't have. They know people. Gary's worked, done movie posters, so he's an artist that has connections all through that, and they've got information. Now, they are not usually PG, so if you are enjoying our show because we keep it clean, know that may not be where you want to go. If you're not offended by the F-bomb being dropped 8 times in 2 minutes, then check them out, because you never know when Gary's just going to say something weird. Gary's great, but Gary also, he'll tell you that he kind of runs the house sometimes. Keith will just laugh at him. So And of course, one of our partners here, the Scallywag himself, over at the Scallywag Productions on YouTube. He's one of our contributors on Geeky Kool. Check his stuff out; it's worthwhile. And of course, when our site's back up and going, and it should be in the next day or two, GeekyKOOL.com, cool with a K. For those of you that are old like me and not Ashely, cool in the gang, cool. Cool with a K, like Cool in the Gang. Ashley's going, I'll have to look that up. Who the heck is that? Um,
All right. Well,
and
thank you for inviting me on the show. I know we talked about it a while, and it just never happened for one reason or
well,
another.
and some of it was the timing, and I had tried to get the show off the ground last year, and then a lot of things happened. So I'm glad that we're doing this regularly, and I'm so glad I wanted to have you on right away, and timing just hasn't worked out, but I'm glad it has now, Ashley. And thank you again for this wonderful book. It's been a great read, and hope you guys all have a great evening. Stay geeky and stay safe out there, and be smart. And please, please, everybody, show kindness and love to each other. It doesn't matter your skin color. It doesn't matter. It's also Pride Month. It doesn't matter your sexual orientation. Show love to each other, because that's really what we have to do as humanity. And in this crazy world, that's the only thing that's going to make a difference. Until next time, till next week, see you all later.